Hello, guys. Thanks for tuning into this week's 5Y5. Ali Maxwell here, George Ellick there. We get together every week in our positions as 5 Yards ambassadors just to have a chat about the week that was in the world of football and all things 5 Yards as well. George, how are you getting on today? How have you enjoyed the last week in the world of football?
Fantastic. Thank you, mate. I've, as ever, enjoying the football. It does feel relentless. I'm not complaining at all, but I must say, I'm almost surprised there isn't a few games on Christmas Day this year. But 5 Yards has been great. Good to see so many people enjoying it and getting involved. Looking forward to tomorrow, Friday, the next transfer window. But what I want to know, Ali, since we last spoke, who has been getting all of the buys?
Well, I'm not saying that we are early 5 Yards influencers, George, but Angelino, one of the most traded players on platform after we spoke about him last week. I'm sure that was nothing to do with my pitch to buy Angelino, but rather what he was doing on the pitch. And of course, his value on the platform compared to his PP that he's been racking up this season. But you've also got bigger names like Bruno Fernandes. Even Wilfried Zaha was one of the most traded players on 5 Yards this week. A lot of young talent, as you'd expect, the likes of Camavinga, Florian Wirtz of Leverkusen, Jens-Peter Hauge of Milan, Erling Haaland and Gio Reyna from Dortmund. Even Ciro Immobile is on there as well. And lastly, the man that I know you want to talk about today, Curtis Jones of Liverpool, one of the most bought players on 5 Yards this week. And no surprise that that's the case.
Curtis Jones. What a player he is. Put in another star turn for Liverpool in the 2-1 win over Tottenham. We're not going to talk about who was the better side on the night last night. We're just going to talk about Curtis Jones, who playing on the left-hand side of a midfield three, but incredibly versatile and given a kind of license to roam around the pitch by Jurgen Klopp, a player who can carry the ball very well. He is very tidy in possession. 106 completed passes in the game yesterday for Jones, the most of any Liverpool player, which shows you how much he's getting on the ball. He's up on 5 Yards at the moment, 54 million. But I'm not going to promise you that price will still be around tomorrow, because I know the guys, the analysts, are all beavering away trying to work out what price they're happy to lay, because Curtis Jones has now played 90 minutes in 7 of Liverpool's last 8 games. I would almost go as far as saying, of course, we have Thiago Alcantara to come back. We have the fact that Fabinho is a natural centre midfielder. When they have enough centre-backs, he doesn't have to play there, although he could feasibly stay at centre-back given how well he's been playing. But there's got to be an argument that Jones retains his place ahead of the likes of Wijnaldum, possibly Henderson, or even in rotation. He's got 1 goal and 1 assist in the Champions League so far this season. He's got none in the Premier League, but I have absolutely no doubt that they will come. You know, we've seen in the past his FA Cup exploits last season against Everton. He's got a couple of goals in the EFL Cup this season as well. He is somebody who's going to get goals. He is somebody who's going to create as well. And there was a really good article written in the New York Times today by Rory Smith, where he talks about how, where is the fanfare around Curtis Jones, and why aren't people talking about him more? And it's true. You know, he makes the comparison, saying you've got Mason Greenwood at Manchester United, you've got Phil Foden at Manchester City, you've got Mason Mount at Chelsea. It's almost become the norm that you have these players coming, these young English players, whereas 5 or 10 years ago, it didn't happen. You didn't get top clubs playing their own youth team graduates. And in Curtis Jones, we have a player who, you know, I personally think has to be in the next England squad coming up, because he is performing at a very high level for the best team in the country and the Premier League champions. That point that Rory Smith makes in that New York Times piece is kind of reinforced by a scout report written by Joe Morgan back in August up on 5 Yards. This was August the 17th he wrote it, and Curtis Jones' value was 30 million. Now Joe said that he was a buy back then, but looking through the comments, you can see the comments he says, like, who would he be perfect for? A bottom half Premier League side. So even though he's developed so quickly, people weren't really expecting this from Jones, despite what we'd already seen. I mean, his debut goal against Everton was watched by 7.2 million people on the BBC in the Cup last year. So it feels like people are still maybe a little bit behind Jones. I don't know if that's because we've got so many elite English talents coming through that people are focusing on Foden, people are focusing on Greenwood, but there's no reason at all why Jones can't be at least as good as them, and he possibly could be the joker in the pack, you know, the one who's going to really go on and do great things, and he's at the right club to do it. So I think Jones is a buy at 54 million. We don't know where his future is going to be in terms of where he plays, given how well stocked Liverpool are in both wide areas and in midfield. He could play a range of both. He could be that player to deputise for Sadio Mane on the left-hand side of the three as well. So much potential there. Still just 19 years of age. I am incredibly excited about Curtis Jones.
Well, I'm going to talk about Kingsley Coman, and it's sort of continuing a theme of mine over the last few episodes of 5Y5, where I've talked about Alvaro Morata, I've talked about Angelino, and Coman is the third in the thread. And really it's because if you look at 5 yards and you look at performance pay earned this season, those two guys I spoke about previously, and Coman as well, stand out a little due to their value being lower than the majority of the other players who have racked up the PP this season. He's really interesting in so many different ways, Coman. For me, he's a soft buy. I don't know if that's a phrase I just invented in 5 yards terms.
That's what we're here for.
I've bought a portion of Coman, understanding that there are risks that come with it, which we're going to get into. But the reason he's so attractive is he plays for Bayern Munich, a team that, I mean, arguably the best team in the world, but in purely monetary terms on 5 yards, a team that consistently win between 65 and 80% sometimes in a good season of their games in the Bundesliga, and who do so by scoring around 3 goals a game. If you look at the averages over the last 2 or 3 years, the Bundesliga is the third highest performance pay division. So players that get a lot of goals and assists and play for winning teams in that division are going to be the sorts of players that you want. Of course, Bayern are a lock for the Champions League every year and generally go pretty deep, winning it last year. They're already into the round of 16 without much of a fuss this season. The Champions League, as we know, is where the mega performance pay is earned. But of the highest performing PP players on the platform this season, he stands out as a bit of an outlier, like the two I've spoken about previously, because when you compare him to even his own teammates in his position, Sane, who is on platform at 90 million, and Gnabry, who's at 78 million, they are substantially more expensive than Coman, who's a year younger than both of them, at 59 million on 5 yards. That really stands out for closer inspection to me. You have to talk about the major concerns when it comes to Coman. Fitness and longevity, I suppose, being the first one, and then rotation and competition for places being number 2. He's had such a tough time with injuries in his career so far. Ankle injuries, most significantly, a few knee injuries as well. He's probably had 4 or 5 separate injuries already that have kept him out for, let's say, 2 to 4 months at a time. He's even spoken in the past about saying he wasn't sure he'd be able to handle another surgery. Such was its impact on him psychologically. Both of the last 2 seasons, he started 17 league games out of 34. So 50% of the league games available. That's not ideal for a player that you're holding of this value. But this season, since match day 4, so he was absent for the first 3 match days because he had to quarantine, but he also had a small muscle injury. Since match day 4, he has started 8 of Bayern's 9 Bundesliga games, and he also started their first 4 Champions League match days. And once progression was secured after 4 games, he was off the bench for the last 2. I think it's quietly encouraging that since the return of football after the coronavirus break, he's been so available. That was the first hurdle for him to get over. And maybe that break of 2 or 3 months, as we've heard for other players, could have actually done him the world of good. For someone who has constantly been playing at the top level, both in terms of his club and internationally, since he was about 19 years old, maybe 2 or 3 months off has done his body the world of good. The signs are good at the moment, but the caveat is his body has let him down in the past. It's clear that Flick, the Bayern manager, loves him. Not only did he score the winner for him in the Champions League final, but when he's been available, he tends to start games, more so than Sane, who's only got 5 starts out of 10 available Bundesliga games this season. Gnabry's got 9 of 11, and Douglas Costa's clearly become the sort of 4th option, a good option for them to have. But it's basically between 2 of those 3 that get the starts. And so far, Coman has been getting them ahead of Sane, and he's been performing. Like, he's been an absolute PP machine this season. 6.6 million already in performance pay, 1.28 goals and assists per 90 in the Bundesliga, and 1.55 in the Champions League. He plays for Bayern, who are the favourites for this year's Champions League. They got a good draw, Lazio, in the last 16. Of course, there are no guarantees at this stage of the Champions League, but most bookies' odds of around 1.1 for them to progress. I only bring that up because that's an implied probability of 90% that Bayern will be in the quarterfinal. So that means in PP terms, we reckon they've got at least 4 games left in the Champions League, which is more than you can guarantee for many of the other teams. And Coman, I think, in Flick's ideal scenario, in his strongest first 11, I think Coman is a part of it. So given his price compared to some of his teammates and others of his age and his position, I think it's really interesting. And I think it can't be summed up better than a scout report, the most recent on Coman by 5Yards Genesis, where he just said, people still question Coman's natural fitness and ability to stay fit. That is not without justification, and it's something to keep an eye on. But he seems to have turned a corner this season in terms of keeping fit and playing to the peak of his ability. And if he remains at Bayern, he should be hauling in the performance pay for years to come. Basically summed up everything I've said in one paragraph. 5Yards Genesis there. Brilliant scout report on the platform.
Let's get him on.
But I'm interested to know what you guys think about this. Show us what you think in the form of a scout report on the 5Yards platform. If you're not quite buying into Coman, it'd be good to know why. But I think he's an intriguing prospect, and that's why he's been the subject of my 5x5 this week. What's next for you, George?
Well, quickly, the eagle-eyed amongst those watching would have seen me looking at my phone, which is obviously a terrible thing to do when you're hosting a show, but there's a reason why, and it's because the guys have got in touch to say that Curtis Jones has gone up from 54 million to 57 million based on his performance last night. So 57 million will be the price you're buying at, excuse me, if you are getting involved tomorrow. Now on to a player that I want to sell. If I was holding him, I would be getting rid. And it is the 4th most expensive player on 5Yards, Raheem Sterling. Now, I'm going to start, normally we kind of talk about it and then go to a scout report afterwards. But I'm going to speak about Andy Watson's scout report, where he, on the 4th of August, scouted him, said he was a hold at 90 million, which I probably would have agreed with at the time. He's gone up 3 million since then. And there's a really nice piece here. You know, if you haven't seen the scout reports yet, go and have a look at them. They're broken up really well. And the style of play piece of Andy's report is totally right about Sterling. Sterling has transformed his game since his move to City. I think a lot of people still perceive him as a dynamic, pacey dribbler. And although he can still beat a player, he is more of an intelligent penalty box poacher now. How often do you see Sterling getting a tap in at the back post? He has developed his finishing way past what he used to be at Liverpool. That is, of course, correct. We've seen the progression of Sterling, the wing wizard, to Sterling, the poacher. I mean, there used to be jokes that he literally couldn't shoot, and now he is a very good finisher in the penalty box. But his goal scoring form is very poor. He scored just 1 goal in his last 10, and that is, of course, a tiny, tiny sample size. And of course, we can expect Raheem Sterling to return to the level that, well, we can expect him to return to some kind of goal scoring form. But I just think the 93 million is toppy, is too high. If you think the fact that he's the 4th most expensive player on the game suggests that we think, or 5Yards think, that he is going to get the most performance pay of anyone in world football, the 4th most. And I'm not having that at all. He's playing for a City side who are seemingly on the wane. With Pep Guardiola committing his future to the club, there's every chance we're going to see a raft of signings in the summer. And I wouldn't say that Sterling is necessarily above one of those who could be replaced if his form doesn't improve. He's 26 years old. So it's good that he's developed the kind of player that he is, because it's pretty rare that you see players of his former skill set who manage to progress well into their 20s and early 30s. I just think we may have seen a purple patch from a fantastic player at a time where his club was massively on the rise. Even his place in the England side, I would argue at the moment, is under threat, given that he's never really performed for England on a consistent basis. You look at the players who are now coming into the side. You know, if we accept that Harry Kane will start up top, then you've got 3 of Rashford, Sterling and Sancho who have to get their way into the wide areas. And that's not even talking about Jack Grealish, who of course has played so well since he's come in. It wouldn't massively surprise me if Sterling's form doesn't continue, then he could be the one to make way. Look, I think it's pretty risk-free, this. I mean, I don't think the chances of him far eclipsing that 93 million are particularly likely. He will score a lot more goals in his career. He's got plenty more to do. a move to Europe wouldn't be out of the question either. I don't think. It just wouldn't be a massive surprise to me is if we've seen the best of Sterling already. And he's a player that I have huge respect for.
Yeah, no, I buy all of that, ironically, given that it's a sell that you're discussing. And I just want to talk about a player who we just can't ignore in the EFL. And I wonder if this might become a bit of a feature of this lad's career. He's actually the most expensive EFL player on 5 yards at £49 million. And of course, that's because he is owned by the Premier League champions, Liverpool, and he's only being borrowed by Blackburn Rovers at the moment in the Championship. And I'm so delighted that he is, because he's just been a joy to watch. From the moment he arrived at Blackburn, the confidence with which he is playing is incredible. And we have been lucky to cover a lot of talented players in the EFL over the last few years. Many of them brought through at EFL clubs, and many of them on loan from elite academies, elite clubs. And Elliot is still, despite how many players are now playing at the top of the game that we've covered over the last few years, is still doing something that I've not seen before. Because of the pure fact of his age, it's so unusual that a 17-year-old would be sent down to Championship level. It's much easier, much more comfortable, much safer for these elite clubs to keep them in their academies, to give them a great education and to look after them and wrap them in cotton wool for a little bit longer. But they haven't done that with Elliot, and he's absolutely thriving playing senior football for Tony Mowbray's side, to the point where in 5 yards terms, of course, and certainly when you're looking at EFL players, you have to be sure that these guys are going to reach the top level, because otherwise you're not going to get a huge return. Even though Elliot has 4 goals, 4 assists and 5 wins already as a starter for Blackburn, it's only 390,000 that he's earned in performance pay. But I'm just so sure that this is the lowest level he'll ever play at, essentially, for the next 10 years at least. And so I definitely want to be along for the ride when it comes to Elliot. He's going to play, let's say, 35, 40 games for Blackburn this season. He's going to be one of the better attacking players in the division. And he's going to head back to Liverpool with that experience under his belt, aged 18. Not 21 or 22, like a lot of the guys we've seen, who then have to get their chance as a 22, 23-year-old. He could be getting a chance next season for Liverpool, aged 18. But of course, they're a smart club, and they might think that actually this has worked so well, he could develop elsewhere. And I would back them more than most to get his next loan right. They've clearly identified Blackburn as a good place for him. And that reflects pretty well on those powers that be at Liverpool who have got Elliot's development in mind when they're thinking about him. One thing I like about Elliot's game, and it's an interesting topic because it could hold him back at the very top level, but it's also what's kind of exciting me most about his potential is that even as a winger, cutting in off the right, his game is not based on speed or athleticism. It's not based on a superiority over the fullbacks in the Championship on a purely physical level, the sort that might be less at the top level, where the fullbacks are just that little bit more athletic, that little bit quicker and stronger. It's basically been based on a technique and footballing brain combination that I've not seen from a 17-year-old. The way that he receives the ball, either at a standstill or on the move, is fantastic. His first touch is so dependable. But it's the way that he links with other players, the sorts of creative passes that he plays, clever runs that he makes, like he did on Wednesday night to get on the end of a through ball from Armstrong and to finish well under pressure. That makes me think that there's just something really special about this player in a maturity standpoint and a football brain standpoint. Physically, I think it's unlikely he's going to develop into an elite speedster or a really powerful winger. But I think you can expect plenty of development still. Of course, age 17, he's got a lot to develop physically. There are so many pitfalls for a player this young. And that's what you have to be wary of. You know, bad luck, bad choices, injury, of course, loss of confidence, or just a club that doesn't make the right choices for him. I'm confident that Liverpool will. He can look at Trent and Curtis Jones, who you've spoken about as examples of actually how many opportunities a talented young player can get at that club. And this loan so far could not have gone any better. So I'm sure Liverpool will be thrilled, keeping a very close eye on him. Harvey Elliott, as a 17-year-old, doing what he's doing is so exciting. And at 49 million, I'm going to make sure that I've just got a small piece of him so that I can be along for the journey, because the sky's genuinely the limit for this young player. I think the most expensive Championship player on 5 yards, and it's not hard to see why, George.
No. But talking of EFL players, I mean, we're not going to keep you for too much longer because, as ever on the 5x5, we are rabbiting on because we like talking about good young footballers, especially when it comes to the EFL. But there are loads and loads of players who are being put up on the game tomorrow, ready for tomorrow's transfer window. And looking through the list, the opportunities are endless. My favourite one of the lot is Jobe Bellingham. When you see Jobe Bellingham on 5 yards, that is not a typo. That is Jude's younger brother, who's going up at £8 million. Loads of other EFL legends in there. Rob Dickey, a player very close to my heart, 6.5 million. Adam Ida, 17 million. That's one of those where if you just take the view that he's going to play in the Premier League in his career, that has to be a buy because he's just a goalsman. He's a bagsman. That's it. Tyree Backinson, 8 million, is of course having a great season at Bristol City. Plenty of others. Malik Wilkes at Hull having a good time back in League One. And who else? Josh Koroma at 10 million, who sadly is injured now for 3 months, but looks like he has the potential to be a very, very good player. And £10 million for another guy who gets a lot of goals and a lot of assists. Looks pretty tasty. Jason Knight, of course, who's having a very good season for Derby, one of plenty Derby players destined for the top. But the player I want to talk about the most, well, two players I want to highlight really. Joel Randall is £3 million, Ali. He's a player that I know you like a lot. He's 21 years old, so he's kind of a bit of a late developer in terms of getting into the first team. But he's playing for an Exeter side in League Two who are scoring goals for fun, and he looks a player who is developing very, very quickly. He's had a lot of loans in non-league. If he carries this on for the rest of the season, he will be leapfrogging League One, I would have thought. We said the same, though, about Randall Williams last season, who ended up staying at the club. But he's just a player to keep an eye on. I'd probably say he's a player to watch for the time being. I can't imagine that price is going to rocket up, but keep an eye on him. But Charlie Kirk is the one for me here at 4 million. He's only $1 million higher than Randall. He's already done a hell of a lot more in his career in the EFL. He's 22 years of age, so only a year older. But if you're looking at his record at Crewe, he's played 156 games already, scoring 26 league goals. You mentioned PP machine earlier. If Charlie Kirk is in your team and he's not earning performance pay, what is he doing there? Because he's a kind of a player who plays inside off the left, who is a goal threat, who is a creative player, who links brilliantly with their left back, Harry Pickering. But he is somebody who's there to get you goals, to get you assists. And at 4 million for a guy, Crewe have probably some aspirations this season to possibly push their way into the playoffs. So he could be a championship player with them next season. But if not, I mean, we know full well that the Crewe's collection of good young talent is no secret whatsoever. There will be a lot of clubs out there who know a lot about Kirk, who maybe didn't get involved last summer because they've just come up from League Two and he hadn't yet done it really in League One. That's not the case anymore. He's a brilliant, brilliant player for £4 million, an absolute snip. This could genuinely be a guy who in a couple of years' time is playing towards the top end of the championship, playing in a position where goals and assists are absolutely key. So 4 million, he'd be the one for me, but loads and loads of guys. So make sure you check out tomorrow. Loads of new players from the EFL and beyond, Europe, Premier League, all over the place. So do request any players you want. We will do our very best to get them up no matter what level of football they are playing in. But Charlie Kirk, the one for me from the EFL this week.
Big transfer window on Friday, the 18th of December. And just to let you guys know, there's a slight tweak to the transfer window schedule because of the days that Christmas and New Year fall on. So it won't be open on Christmas Day, but that's probably not a bad thing. It will, however, be open on Christmas Eve. So the 24th of December, the Thursday, transfer window open. And then the following Tuesday, as usual. And then the 31st of December, the day before New Year's Day, that will be a transfer window day as well. So make sure you check out the 5 Yards Twitter account for a full list of players going up on the platform on Friday. Make sure you are writing as many scouting reports as you physically can. Keep populating that platform so there's more information for everyone using 5 Yards. Thank you for watching this week's 5x5. We hope that you'll join us again next time.